Hello everyone, welcome to the AOI streams, in-depth conversations with digital artists and experts to explore how blockchain technology is impacting the future of art. AOI, also known as Art on Internet, is the movement for emerging arts and technology. I'm Federica, and today I'll be your host. Hello and welcome to the AOI Masterclasses for the Velocity series by Bybit and Red Bull Racing. In this episode, Kristian Stoveland, the second artist on the lineup, dives into the creative process behind Pursuit and Eco of Intensity. Hello everyone, welcome to a new masterclass with the Velocity series by Red Bull Racing and Bybit. Today we have the second artist of the lineup, and I'm so excited to have Kristian Stoveland with us. Hi Per, how are you?
Hi, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. It's nice to be back again.
Yes. And it's amazing because now we kind of see the developments, right? We saw you a couple of months ago and you showed us everything about your creative process, your career and everything, which by the way, if anyone is interested, you can go back to that video. We're going to link it. And now we're going to see kind of like your creative journey developing into this new project. So super excited to talk about this today. And why don't we start with the very first beginning, like how did this collaboration come to happen for you? What was it that kind of resonated with your artistic journey when you were first proposed to be part of the Velocity series?
So when I was approached with the Velocity series, first of all, I have to say, it kind of intrigued me when we were talking about Oracle Red Bull Racing, because I mean, Formula One has been something I have been interested. I mean, I feel every kind of, the classic stereotypical boy is probably very interested in cars, and I'm no exception to that. So Formula One has something I've been kind of watching since I was a child, and I haven't been obsessed over it, but it's one of the sports that I actually watch from start to finish if it's on. And so when I got this opportunity, I really jumped at the opportunity to try to see if I could depict the word velocity in a way that was representative of me and my art. So sorry, what was the rest of the question?
How did it kind of merge with your artistic journey at that time? So was it something you were working on already and it kind of just happened to coincide with the project, or what were you up to when the project started?
No, so this was kind of more of what you say, I get the brief first and then the idea develops afterwards. So I spend a lot of time kind of getting inspired to see which way I wanted to go. There were a few directions. One technique I often use in the really initial phase of ideas is that, so you can use services like, for example, Pinterest is something that is often what I use to just in the beginning to start the research process, see what other people have done. I mean, there can be totally unrelated images that trigger some kind of idea in my head, and I can start building on that. So the whole thing started with a mood board, or what would just a Pinterest board, which I just added images that intrigued me and I felt had something to do with velocity in some kind. I can actually show you this Pinterest board. Let's see here. There we go. So this is the actual Pinterest board I was using for the Pursuit project. I mean, it started at this point here. You can see it's very sci-fi inspired. I think in the beginning, I was very open to what I wanted to do. I think I was thinking a lot in the terms of, escape velocity, outer space, spaceships, stuff like that. And you can see through the progression of these images, which I saved, you can see it gets a bit more monumental. And here we have some impressions, but at some point I came over this image here and something, just the idea popped into my head. what if I create a landscape and try to capture the, the essence of open shutter photographies at night? You've seen probably hundreds of these during your lifetime. I mean, I've even made them myself, taking a picture, holding in the shutter and kind of drawing something with lights. This also harkens back to Void and how I work with lights there. After a few years, I kind of have conceptualized how lights, how people, or how I at least view lights when I see them. And this triggered the idea of as soon as I saw this, there was some merging between what I like to do when it comes to landscape and the whole concept of velocity and Formula One. I could see the bends in this road, and it started to dawn on me: what if I create a series that captures the aesthetic essence of this image and at the same time keeps true to kind of my style, and I can also aesthetically see if I can emulate Formula One courses or racetrack courses in some kind of way, and make some kind of composition out of different parts of a racetrack course, and see if that was visually pleasing. In my head, this was going to work, but ahead of me now was kind of getting that initial idea I have in my head, the visualization I have in my head, getting that over into something that's more concrete, so I can take, and this is often a lot of the process when I create, is that I can often see things in my head and I know exactly how I want it to look like. But in some cases, or from that point, I need to kind of make it or get it as approximately to where I'm thinking I want it, to just verify that what I'm seeing in my head is actually what I'm seeing in reality. And that process can be time consuming. So in this case, I had this idea in my head, and now I need to make a proof of concept for myself to make sure that everything I've thought out until now actually works. So there's been a lot of process, so my thinking at this point, and the concrete working on this, it probably starts a couple of weeks later. So I can remember after we talked about starting this project, it took a couple of weeks to land on some kind of initial idea, and it took probably a couple of weeks more to just get the proof of concept. And we can talk more about that. But yeah, this is kind of the initial idea.
Amazing. Yeah, I do remember looking at this picture and talking about it. It was very exciting. Now to look back, it's exciting that it has created all of this. So one of the things that I actually noticed, in this picture that you were inspired by, but also on your previous works, whether it was Harvest, whether it was Delta, one of the installations as well, is this kind of like poetic contrast between this darkness and the stillness in the darkness and this like streaks of light, right? So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, what does this contrast mean to you? Is there something that is there any emotion you're trying to evoke with this contrast?
I think for the contrast contrast is a good way of, how should I say it? Differentiating input in a way. It's contrast. With contrast, you get relativity. There's something contrasted to something else, and you have nuance, or you have hard contrasts like life or death, and black or white, or light or dark. And I think in many cases, in at least how I work, and Void in that case, is that especially Norway is a Nordic country, there's a lot of darkness, especially at the winter time. So lights is quite important to keep us wanting to live in this darkness. And I think that there is a lot of power in that contrast, because it gets you can get a lot of intensity and you can evoke a lot of emotion with contrast. Not to say that you can't do it without, but I think there's some parallels between kind of what Void does and at least this project, where where I'm trying to emulate light, light as it is in the physical world, and I think a lot of inspiration has come from my work at Void too, because you get a lot of bang for the buck when you use lights. You get and the contrast there is what kind of pops out and people, yeah, remember.
Absolutely. That's very beautiful. And can you show us something more about Pursuit? Maybe you show us a little bit about the process while you show us the outputs.
Yeah, sure. So I have just some pictures here, which I can, let's see, I can show you. So I just, first of all, I just want to start off with this, this image here, where it just depicts how a Formula One course looks, because what this is kind of what I have to do research. I need to know what I'm trying to emulate. So in this case here, I just took a look at an existing course just to see which parts of the course, how I could segment this course into different, general terms, like a curve and a chicane, or a parabolica, you can see here. And yeah, trying to see kind of categorize things, because I wanted to create some kind of trait system where that determines what you were actually looking at. Here's another picture I used to kind of to give me inspiration to this project. You can see there's some pursuit in this image here, and I'm very happy kind of how I ended up compared with this kind of initial image. So the first idea I had to do is, so through a lot of work in the harvest, and before that, I've worked on this landscape generator. I've been fascinated by landscapes, and I was again going to use, or further develop that landscape generator. So in this case, I thought about lines crossing the surface of landscape. So I took what I had then as a landscape generator. I need to make this proof of concept like we talked about. So I started off with just drawing some random lines I had to do, and trying to see if I could do some easy emulations. This was, again, more for proof of concept, to learn what the issues would be in how to create this, as also to see if it visually actually worked like I thought it would. This is one of the first initial ideas. You can see how the lines are kind of following the landscape here. And yeah, some more, you can see there's a few bugs here, but it was more just to get the impression of how it technically would work. And I had to, I wanted these lines. These lines represent kind of some kind of pursuer or racer or something that's crossing this landscape, and it kind of leaves behind this dust. So I had to, after I came to this process, I had to start a new proof of concept. You can see here I've added some lines and dust, just playing around with some different colors. I just love the texture of how dots and or this graininess gives to the image when you add these dots you can see here. Just testing. A lot of the time when I'm working, I need to test. I test a lot of things at the same time. It's colors, it's functionality, it's aesthetics, all at the same time. So I can start working on something that's supposed to be functionality, and then I look at something that has maybe something to do with color, and then I kind of jump between those when I feel like it. It gets messy to work with, but I mean, one part feeds the other, and you kind of, in some iterative process, it gets better over time. So I went over more. So I got the functionality working. I have the lines, I have the dots, I have the landscape, and I needed to kind of play around a bit more with color to see what would work. I mean, now what we're seeing here is colored lines on a landscape. It doesn't feel like it's lights yet. It doesn't feel kind of emitting light. So just here also you can see that I'm using the same shape, because what I realized quite quickly working on this is that I had to do a lot of work on the actual composition of the segments or the corners and stuff like that, because I did make an initial random generator, but the problem was that it never ended up in the middle, or the composition was always off. This is one lucky output I got, so I saved that and used that shape to do some more color study. So I have a lot of images that have this exact shape, which I use to test different colors and get a feeling of how this algorithm would work. So I was learning a lot from experiment in this phase here. We can go on to some different colors. This is actually a harvest color I just put in to see how that worked. I also learned that the approach I had to harvest was not going to work for the idea, or the idea I had for this project. I wanted this to feel like, lights emitting and, more explosive and velocity in some kind of way. You can also see there's some issues with how the lines and the terrain work. So I knew I had to do some work there. So I was just basically filling up a list with things that I knew I had to work on. And that's kind of the part of this first process. Especially when you start from the idea of having an idea you want to fulfill, there's a lot of things you need to find out on the way. So that's, compared to other projects, I play around until I get the idea, and then it kind of more in a more linearly fashion gets to the end point. But here we have to start with an idea and we start with a brief, and then we kind of get to the end. The process is a bit different. Here again, I had to save the same shape because I still hadn't made a general enough coarse generator that had composition that, sometimes these lines ended up away from the screen because there's a lot of intricate details to why that was hard. But I realized that composing these segments was going to be a challenge. Also, some other outputs to give you an impression on the composition. I also, played a lot with, light backgrounds, and I also realized quite quickly that in order to capture that feeling we had of this initial image of the open shutters, I knew that this series had to be quite dark, and I wanted to be very homogeneous. So I learned quite quickly too that light colors, even though I really like this image here, it wasn't right for this project. Maybe I'll come revisit this sometime. This is also one I was very happy with. The next point here is that when I came to this point here, there were a few things I knew just stuck out of things I need to work on. The first was, how do I figure out composition? How do I make sure that each image looks nice, has a cool turn, and is centered good enough to kind of make it like a well-rounded composition. And there was also this issue with how these lines are supposed to negotiate the terrain. I knew I needed in some way to make sure that these lines are actually riding on a course and not just randomly in the terrain. And I knew there was some color work that had to be done. Instead of what I'm doing in this image here, you can see how each line has one color. And I realized that, it looks, again, I think this looks good, but it isn't what I wanted. So I had to work on working on a different way of combining colors. So gradients was something that popped out to me. And instead of the colors being separate per line, it was more separate from start to finish of a line. And so let's talk about first the terrain part. So what I had to do with the terrain is that, so first the landscape is generated. First the courses are generated, and then we create the landscape, and then we merge these two together. Now at that merging point, it wasn't kind of taking into consideration the actual terrain. What I did is create some kind of masking effect that before you add these lines, you do a sweep through the whole landscape where those lines are going to be, and then you're telling it that when you're creating the landscape, do not do anything with this area where these lines are going to be. In that case, you got a flat area. So this is kind of the result of how that works. You can see that that everything is kind of lifted up except for where the lines go. So that was some kind of, I had to create this coding module that did this masking part, which I got quite happy with, because it now feels more like a race course. As another example. And then, so now this was kind of the terrain part, and the another issue was kind of the composition part. Now, I spent a lot of time working on how that one was supposed to work. I wanted it to initially be a trait was selected. Was it going to be a chicane? Was it going to be a straight? Was it going to be just a regular corner or a parabolica? I wanted that to be determined first, and then make the algorithm create what we wanted. In that case, I had to work on stuff like positioning, making sure that's always in center, and all these things. So after spending quite a lot of time on that part, separate from this project, just basically line theory, vector graphics, and stuff like that, I came back to this project, added these lines, this part of the code, and this is one of the first results after when we're starting to get to where pursuit is. So this is now taking into consideration what I learned about color. I realized first I wanted dark backgrounds in this project, and all of them are supposed to be dark. And I saw that the way I'm working with gradients here, now we're getting into kind of more lights in some. It's still stylized in some way. It's not directly lights. If you wanted it to look like real lights, what you would do is have basically a white line in the center, and the further dots get out from the center, it becomes more colored. That's basically how we view lights when we see it. I mean, the brightness is quite white and the colored is on the side, but I wanted to work with a gradient going through the whole thing, and then these dots coming straight up. So this is a chicane. You can see how the composition makes sure that the whole chicane is in the middle, but it's a bit off here and there, so there's some variation. Finally, you can also see that these dots here, or these lines coming out, these color dust that is being left behind, are just going straight up. There's no force representing the turn in any way. So that was kind of the next part I wanted to work on, making sure that it feels like you're in the turn, actually have the centrifugal force pushing the dust outwards, according to the turn they're in. So again, I had to go back, do some calculations, and here's the kind of the result from that process. You can see I'm starting to get, these are very angled, sprays out. You can also see that there's some calculation being off here. There's some areas that are just totally, I mean, it can look nice, but I knew this wasn't right. This was a bug, so I had to fix that. And came back to this here. Now you can see we have a nice kind of dust spray, and it's spraying out compared to kind of the turns it's taking. Yeah, so that's the process from the initial idea to a functional algorithm. At this point, I started to work on, tweaking traits and colors and, palettes and other variables to create kind of a well-rounded range of different outputs, which were, well connected together into one series.
That's great. That was amazing to watch. Thank you for I was thinking while we were watching this, I really love seeing the different kind of stages and how you showed us, like, when I got here, I actually didn't like this part and I worked on it again. I was wondering how does it work for you to understand when you finally reached your goal? Is just pure visual, pure like, yeah, this exactly looks like what I was thinking? Or is there some sort of like emotion that you feel that you're like, okay, this feels right now, or should I work more on this? How does it work for you?
Oh, that's actually a very good question. I think when I've been working on earlier projects and this project, I think the feeling that makes me stop and realize that I've got something here, it's hard to explain, but I would say the closest I get to the word is awe. There's there's something that hits me, and the feeling starts here, and it kind of, I often end up just looking and going, wow, in my head. I think, and that happens every now and then. Not, and I mean, a lot of my colleagues avoid. Other people can instigate that feeling in me. But my point is that when I get that feeling when I'm working on my own projects, that's when I know well, at least I think I know I have something that's worthwhile. And I think when we got to the point where, you know, the chicane, which we just saw, and the color just popped, background is perfect to kind of contrast that color. I remember I had that feeling of awe and knew that now finally I've got somewhere. But to that point, I was still open to going, nah, this doesn't work. We need to go. But I was still quite confident that this was going to look the way I thought it would. But the end result, I think the end result isn't exactly where I thought I would be going. I mean, the dust at least does much more than I thought it would with this project. But in essence, I think this is a case where my initial idea actually turned out quite similar to what the result, actually turned out quite similar to the initial idea.
That's great. That's amazing to hear. And let's also talk about the other collection, Eco of Intensity.
Yep.
They obviously kind of like complement each other, but they're also quite different. So would you mind talking a little bit about those?
Sure. I have a set of images I can go through here too. So, like, I think you recognize this from the earlier sets of images. I think when I came to this point, I knew through the brief we had, or the initial phase where I got the idea, I knew that we also had we were creating an open edition or some kind of extra artwork for the Velocity Pass holders. And when I got to this point, the point where I finished this masking thing and making sure that the actual area, the lines we're going to pass were flat and looked like a race course. I also realized there was some magic in this image here, and thought this was where I wanted the open edition, which I have called the Echo of Intensity. This was we were getting into the area where we were, because through all this work I realized that having the light background and using colors in this way, which gives you more like a crayon feeling rather than something that's emanating light, I knew that I wanted this white background and that feeling in this open edition as a contrast to the darkness in Pursuit and the nighttime racing in Pursuit. So I started working on these, and it goes the whole, what happens here and the dust and stuff like that was really interesting to me, and I really wanted to get closer into that to see more of it. So I started playing around more with this code and zooming more and more in. What I realized is that this system didn't scale well by just scaling it up, so I had to do a lot of tweaking on different number of variables to get that right feeling. So here we're still on this, and so I did this extra work to kind of zoom in and to get right into the intensity of a turn. So this was the first test. You can see that we're zooming into the corner. There's a lot of what would you say? There's a lot of energy into this. I knew I was getting somewhere. It was going in the right direction, but there's still something missing. It was still quite. I needed more elements, something more to make it appealing and interesting. Also, the idea of making this open edition a generative token was very, very much more interesting to me. I mean, there's a lot of debate when it comes to open editions and how they work. I haven't done one myself before, but I thought this was an excellent opportunity to create an open edition that is actually unique for each token. So I knew that I wanted to make some variation, but it has to be similar in some way. They need to, they need to belong together. It's still an open edition, which I feel means that the variants can't be that different. It's supposed to be similar. So here are some other. I did some initial tests. We can see here. I was very happy with this one because now it gets really intensive. But like I said, there was still something missing, and I remember there's some maybe a bit too much white space here. When we're getting here, it just becomes noise. There's not enough contrast to actually make seeing anything other than just very well mixed dots. So again, I had to go back. I added one extra element, which is not in Pursuit, and then because I thought about coloring these the squares you see that makes up the terrain. So this next image, which is actually an image taken from the final algorithm, you can see how it becomes a bit more distinct compared to this. When I added these lines, you get some detail from the terrain. Kind of you don't see the terrain, but you can see the shadow of the terrain, which for me made the whole thing much more interesting. And taking the essence of a turn and the speed intensity, and yes, so for me it was very natural to name this project Echo Intensity. You can see here there's quite a lot of difference between one and the other, but it's still very similar too, and that was kind of what I wanted to do with this. So there's going to be this is going to be an open edition, which people can mint as many as they want to in a set time frame. So I need to make sure that each one is unique enough, but not too unique that you don't understand that this is obviously the same system. So here we have 3 examples. One other element I'd like to add into this was that, so I've been I was a child. I was collecting collectible card games was something I liked. It was very fun to get these, this rare card. And I've been gaming in my early years. I remember when World of Warcraft came out, I was playing there, at launch, and that feeling of getting that, epic or legendary item, and how the special feeling of getting something rare. So I wanted to incorporate that into this generative open edition token in a way that there's a slight chance that you might get a different color palette than this one, which is the by far most common trait. But you can, for example, if you're lucky, you can get a black and white version, which has a slight chance too. And then you even have this very, very, very super rare one, which is this palette here, which for me is more like, I know it's contrasting the colors of this one. It's basically nighttime. This is dawn, the dawn, or some kind of, it just gives some, the extra, for me, it gives this, extra intensity when we can see this artwork in different different palettes too. So for the collectors, since it's an open edition, I wanted to add some rarity so people could maybe be lucky and get a really rare palette of this artwork.
Right. And also like a kind of like a fun fact that I remember you told us is that when you were making the harvest, you were already looking into potentially like zooming in the harvest. And then you kind of decided to go another way. And this was like a perfect occasion to bring that up again, right?
Yeah, now that I've actually done that study in this project, maybe I'll revisit harvest in some way and see if I can do some magic there.
That's amazing. And also I wanted to ask you as well, like given what you just showed us and the especially with the open edition, really, how much has this blockchain technology affected the way that you have created this, especially, using art blocks? Like how is that giving like a layer of opportunity for this collection?
Well, that's an interesting question. When I started up and with NFTs in 21, I think it was. Um, since I was coming from nowhere, I had to kind of there was no platform I could just work on. So the NFTs I created then were the classic PNGs and JPEGs. And I remember FX Hash coming out and introducing me to how you actually write code and the minting process and all that. And for me, it was obvious. At least for me, it was obvious this is what I want to create, because there's some magic when you don't know what is actually going to be there. The crafts or an energy you have to put into to make sure that even though you don't know what's going to come, it will still look good. That whole part of there really makes it interesting for me. So, having done a few projects on FX Hash really trained me up on that way of thinking. So when I had the opportunity of using the Artblocks engine for this project, after my experience with the Harvest, it's become very much like a home to me, because it feels very natural to do it in that kind of way. And I won't say something 100% sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if most of my projects in future will come on either Artblocks engine or in some fashion be that way, because for me that is what's making the whole process challenging. As soon as I'm kind of delivering a JPEG, there's always something in back of mind saying that, well, it didn't become 100% perfect. I can put it into Photoshop and fix something here. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with that, but for me, that's not correct. It has to be, the output has to come from the code. I'm not touching it afterwards. It's either like that or I'm making something else. And therefore, for me, the Artblocks engine has been really, like I said, felt like home to be there.
That's beautiful. No, it's definitely like a way to also let go of that specific vision that you had from the beginning, right? So yeah, you want to create this specific thing, but at a certain point, the idea of having not having too much control on it, I think it also helps with the process and to really let it go and be like, okay, it's ready, and now people can go and enjoy it, right?
Yeah, and there are a lot of ideas that actually have shown up because I made a mistake. In the code, and then something else happened. I was going, hey, this wasn't what I was supposed to be, but it looks cool. What did I do? And then I have to go back in the code, see what I actually wrote wrong, and then go, so if I write things in this way, that's what actually gets produced. That I'll remember that for some later time.
Amazing. That's awesome. All right. I think we are at the end of the masterclass for today. And I just want to remind everyone who's watching this masterclass right now that the drop is happening today at 2 p.m. UTC. And it's going to be amazing. We've talked about this before, but having you in this lineup is incredible. We're so honored to have you. So thank you so much for taking this opportunity.
Oh, it's been an honor, and I'm really happy to be part of the lineup. I'm stoked that Rick and Snowfro are there, and this whole journey has been quite fun and very educational.
And also for anyone who is in Tokyo, we will host an exhibition on Friday at 7 p.m. So make sure you DM us if you haven't yet. We have a guest list, and it's going to be amazing. We're going to also share videos and pictures with everyone coming.
Yes, please come. I'll be there myself. I'm looking really forward to being in Tokyo and the whole exhibition. It's going to be amazing, where you can get a deep dive of the pursuit and echo of intensity.
Amazing. We're so excited for this amazing week of a lot of news and a lot of surprises. So thank you so much again, Perk, for taking the time.
Thank you.
And yeah, we'll speak very soon. Thank you.
Will do. Okay. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the AOI streams. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe to listen to more stories from the pioneers of the ecosystem.